Welcome to Navigating Change, everyone, the podcast from Tybal Inc. My name is Pete Wright, and that there is Howard Tybal.
And that there is Pete Wright.
I want to talk to you about organizational anxiety. We've been talking a lot about what happens next as we're trying to move through transformational, transitional periods in our institutions. And I get to thinking about how you approach a team that is dealing with, what we may loosely term as irrational anxiety. As you're leading them through the uncertainty that comes with transformation or new frontiers. And I know you approach this in your consulting work. I'm hoping you could share some of your thoughts with us.
There's so much to say here. So, the longer I do this, the more I realize there's a certain kind of human behavior that you really cannot change. And some people are wired to have uncertainty be something that they go, okay, here's an opportunity for me to do the next best thing, and there's other people who are wired like, this is going to be bad for me, right? And then there's people in the middle who haven't decided yet, but are willing to invest enough of themselves to figure out if it is going to be bad or not bad. You're talking about that irrational side, which is really a reaction versus a decision, a choice. And I think that in my work in higher ed, especially now, there's a need to help people make choices around their natural reactions they're going to have. If I told you you're moving,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Your first reaction would be, wait. What do you mean I'm
terrified?
moving?
Right.
Yeah, I'd be terrified too.
There's natural fear. There's uncertainty in my, if I'm moving, then I may be on my way to be terminated for some reason or downsized
or
reorganized.
Here's another really good one. You're going to have a new boss. Oh my God. I mean, think about the initial sort of almost like autonomic reaction to you're going to have a new boss.
Right. And
most people on the other side of this end up in a good place. But we put ourselves through so much internal craziness anticipating how this is going to be bad for us. Now, you put ourselves on a campus. I was thinking about this recently. I have the benefit of, and I joke with clients about this, is that, I think when we walk away, when we do our best work, they walk away and say, this was very helpful. And, I'm thinking to myself, it's easy for me to say these things because I get to walk away, right? They have to live with it. I do not underestimate how hard that is to have to live in the place where they're trying to make change. But at the same time, it is everywhere right now, this sense of anxiety. And I would suggest that the anxiety has more to do with uncertainty than it has to do with difficult choices.
So what is rolled up into uncertainty?
Anything from, are we going to survive the fact that every year upon year, I'm just going to pick this as an example, that we're running at a deficit? The real ones, and again, that's at a board level, at a cabinet level. At the staff, director, associate director, vice president level, they are saying to themselves, is this any different today? And is my job secure? I mean, at the heart of what this comes down to, for every single person, I don't care if you're the president or if you're on the cabinet or you're down anywhere in any organization, the question is my position safe? It's the Maslow's
hierarchy of needs. Sure.
And I think that what people are going through today, and I don't think it's just in higher ed, I think it's everywhere, is between the economy, between the broader issues around terrorism, the NSA. There's so many issues that are producing uncertainty for people that I think that we're running around having a hard time focus and prioritize. I don't know about you, but I'm noticing more and more, including in myself, the challenge in knowing even how to prioritize what I should be focusing on. And when we work with, cabinets, you can tell that they're overwhelmed with all the things they should be doing. And what's the difference between a strategic initiative versus a tactical initiative?
Right. This is a signal versus noise discussion.
So here's something that I've been doing, and I can tell you consistently, people, and we've talked about this in the past, this managing through change, right? Managing yourself and others through change. And it really is about recognizing that there's a natural cycle that we go through in times of change. And the cycle follows a very simple path of, I'm comfortable, to, are you kidding me? What do you mean we have to do X, to, okay, maybe I can make that work, to, this is great, right? And each one of those is an emotional reaction. And in my observation of business today, is that people live in this state of denial and confusion, and they bounce back and forth. And my message to people more and more is we need to elevate what confusion means as a positive state of coming out of denial. Denial. And what I mean by denial is how you know you're in denial is your reaction to something is frustration, anger, and fear.
Right. Well,
because go ahead.
Well, I just want to kind of add to that. I mean, it feels like when we're talking about managing it can be kind of an amorphous term, right? I mean, we're leading a team, which is this blob of kind of this unit of activity, of potential activity, but really we're leading a team of individuals, and the fear exists as in all of us as individuals. Fear of a new boss, that means a new kind of judgment. Fear of a new place of work, that means new potential areas for me to fail. Right. Fear of new tasks, fear of new opportunities for me to trip up, new coworkers who don't know me very well, and they're going to be judging me not just as a professional, but as socially too. And these kinds of fears are so tangible when you're in a period of high flux. And so I think that's one of the things it always comes back to for you, which I think is so valuable, which is this idea of individualism as a real both source of anxiety and source of power.
So when you say individualism, what do you mean? What are you distinguishing that from?
Well, as opposed to focusing on, when you're working with teams, you're working with managers who see teams as teams of individuals who are all dealing with very real human issues.
Yes.
Rather than a leader, and how do you communicate, leader? How do you, stand in the front of the room and present better? How do you, when the real issue is, it doesn't really matter, how you stand in front of this giant team. It matters how you get down on your knees to serve your team.
And I'm sure you've heard this before. I'm sure people listening to this have heard this before. There is no such thing as an organization. That's one way of thinking
talk
about
more
this.
About that. Right.
It's really about a group of people who've come together, and it's their individual identities and actions and behaviors that cause things to happen. We happen to call it an organization, or a department, or a division, or a company, or whatever we want to call it. But really, in the end, behavior change happens at the individual level, And what's fascinating for me, and I'll give you how I know that this is really true, is when I'll do these workshops, at the end and I go around, so what'd you get out of this? 9 times out of 10, the thing that resonates most with people is, it's so helpful to know I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. It's amazing. I've done this with thousands of people, and
they're always surprised.
They're surprised to hear and pleased to hear that what they're going through on their own is what their peers are going through. And that is very comforting to know that it's normal. That's the thing. It's like, oh my God, am I somehow not normal in this? And they walk away going, you know what? Feeling frustrated and angry that you're calling denial, Howard, That's normal. And that's the other thing that's so fascinating is in communicating this model of going from contentment to denial to confusion to renewal, not something I invented, but I've been using a lot in my work. That idea helps people understand. And I tell them, it's not wrong that you're in denial or that you're pissed off. It's not wrong. You have a right to be pissed off. But the problem is when you just get stuck in that place, or you all get together to just reinforce why everybody else is wrong and you're right, that nothing's going to change. So to me, it's about a choice, but it starts with recognizing where you are. And so get back to irrational anxiety. On a campus, I think when I think about change management, there is a need from senior leadership to recognize there will always be a subgroup. And by the way, it's a lot smaller than it comes off as. But they're the loudest voice.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But again, and again, people love, the administrators love to use faculty as an example, and I think it's completely unfair because you could do the same thing with administrators. You could say that the problem is the administrators not really being open-minded to what are they doing that is contributing. But there's a perception that whether a difficult employee, a faculty member, a difficult board member, all it takes is one or two people to give the impression that this group has this kind of negative perception. And what I try and tell leaders is, do not cater to that group. Listen. Actually, this is what I say. So I'll someone will raise their hand recently in a talk I gave, and they said, well, what do we do about this group that doesn't want to change? We have a department, none of them want to change. Or the people that are in there don't want to change. I said, well, you got to do two things. You got to respectfully listen to them, and you need to ignore them and move forward with your initiatives. You are not going to change some of their minds, right? I think what happens is we really want to get everybody on the program. Not everybody's going to be on the program. And actually, it's interesting when I say that, people are actually relieved to hear they don't have to convince everybody that this transformation or direction is a good thing. When I said to people, you know what? You need to let them decide for themselves, respect them, but ignore them and move on with your initiative. It's a very simple reminder, but they really appreciate being reminded they don't have to be the one to convince this really difficult group.
Right. We talk about it as irrational anxiety, but that sort of sounds more like irrational leadership, right? That you have this sort of complex that a leader means you have to appease all the people all the time.
It's so much more satisfying too, isn't it? Though, yeah. I mean, if you can convince the most difficult person, I mean, it's almost like we get into this. Right. It almost becomes a competitive thing.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to convince you.
Which is why so many people become leaders in the first place, right? There's a natural competitive spirit that leads, that sort of compels people to be leaders of groups and to win elections and to win nominations, right?
Well, what's interesting, I think the leadership competency is around really getting people to collaborate. And leaders, I think, historically have been trained in how to tell others what to do. That doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Because there's so much more of a need, just pick a campus, HR, information technology, the faculty, the administrators, when they want to put a change in place, it requires that you get representative bodies from these different groups to come together to make decisions. It's no longer any one person saying, here's what we're doing. Right. An email goes out or a memo goes out, and somehow it magically happens. And this is the transformation that we're in. And I want to say one thing about transformation, Pete. It's a word we throw around a lot. I think it's a great word because what it points to is, it's almost, you can think about transformation as both a noun and a verb, like an action. We're in the process of transforming. And then there is this outcome out there that I actually think, if we're honest, we don't know where this is going to end up. And I speak specifically around higher education. right? There's a lot of pontificating about what we think is going to stick, not stick. And we're arguing about, I was thinking about this morning, we're arguing about who's right and who's wrong, as opposed to what do we want to invest in? I was thinking this morning that I was going to, in my next retreat that involves some faculty and leaders, I'm going to actually have the faculty argue a point that is against what they believe. And I'm going to ask the administrators to argue a point against what they believe. Mm-hmm. To not defend their point of view. Because I think everything we're doing these days more and more is about looking at something and saying whether you agree or disagree, which I think is a red herring.
Right.
To focus on whether you agree or disagree on something. So this is an area where I'm looking to hopefully get people to step back from their point of view and their anxiety to say, all right, play devil's advocate in this conversation. How would you argue for this, even though you were vehemently against this? And I've done this before, and it's a powerful exercise.
Oh, I can imagine. Imagine. There are these symbols that allow us to find affinity with an idea, right? And I think what you're getting at, and one of the things that's sort of a powerful message for me, is that when you are looking at when you talk about the pontification about the industry, right, the field that we're in, so much of the pontification is around what higher ed is going to look like in our 20-year plan, when so much more power is in what is our unique position in our campus. What is the unique thing that we do for our unique student body? And how can we leverage that into what is our future? Because our future is not going to necessarily be tied to higher ed's future.
And it's fear that causes leaders in higher ed to not stay in that conversation about what differentiates us, right? It's a powerful conversation because when you ask that question, if you answer that question and you get some consensus about what differentiates us, it automatically leads to what should we stop doing?
Yes.
And that is, so it's much easier to not put that front and center, because there's a lot of things, programs, services. I was just reading in the Chronicle this morning of a major university that is stopping their political science program and a whole bunch of other liberal arts program, and they ran the numbers, and they're making choices. Now I am certain if we sat down with faculty on that campus, some of them would say, this is antithetical to who we are, that we are not going to be running these liberal arts programs. That's a hard conversation. I don't think there's a right and a wrong answer either. I think that every university and college has to decide for themselves what is their brand going forward. Not brand looking back. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of looking back. This is who we were. The focus needs to be more and more, what do we want to be looking forward? It's a tough conversation.
It's a tough conversation. I've been having this conversation about branding, a lot as a marketing person. This is sort of right in my wheelhouse, and I feel like, we use the word organization often aspirationally. Right? We say organization when really we're not. Organization implies, a group that is organized. We may be a group, but we are not organized. I think aspirationally, we are made up of elements, each individual of character, and a brand of an institution is a group of people of character building an organization of character. And I think that is, when you step outside of that core experience of the individuals that make up your institution, you're stepping out of character and out of brand. And that is, I think, a real challenge for a lot of institutions that are making decisions based on the industry and not on character.
Yeah, and how I translate your concept of individual versus group, and we're not really a group, is the conversation I'm paying attention to is how we throw around the word team all the time. Mm-hmm. And if we're honest, if we were to define what a team means, think about a sports team, right? And how a team operates, and it's about selflessness, and it's about what the good is of the group. where are we trying to go? Sports is just a good, simple analogy for that. Most groups are not teams from a behavior standpoint. It's a good aspiration to say we want to be a team. One of the terms I'm throwing around a lot more, and people can relate to it, is this idea: what does it mean to be a high-performing team, right? You might call yourself a team, but are you a high-performing team? Well, what does that mean? And that's another area that there's huge opportunity at the board level, at the cabinet level, and at the senior administration level to define what that looks like. And I think until they do it, until institutions – actually, let me put it this way. The institutions that really take that seriously and step back and reflect on how do we work more effectively together, they're the ones that are going to have greater traction in terms of making tough decisions, because they will be listening to each other more. Right? They will, just like what we do with each other. We listen deeply. Well, actually, you listen really well to me. I'm not such a good listener.
Well, you got a lot on your mind.
Yeah. Well, okay, but listening is we could spend a whole hour talking about listening.
Well, we could, and this whole the idea of what is a team could very well be another conversation itself. And so I have thoughts, but I'm going to hold them.
You're going to hold them off?
I'm going to hold them.
You're making me anxious now.
We're going to talk about this again. Don't you worry about a thing.
Okay.
This is a good conversation. I think it's an important one for us to continue to have, because this idea of of how institutions fashion their next steps is largely on the backs of themselves as individuals. And I think we need to remember kind of where this takes us in a time of when you're talking back to this point of anxiety, where does anxiety start? Individual anxiety as it leads to the collective.
I'll tell you where my anxiety starts is when I can't get a really good cup of coffee.
Yeah, starts early.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Starts very early in the morning, unless I'm home. If I'm in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, where am I going to get my good cup of coffee?
That's good. I'm glad you're at home then. That makes these conversations easier. Howard Teitel, thank you so much for your time today. And we should do this again sometime.
Okay, we will.
All right, let's do it. For everybody else, thank you so much for listening. If you're listening on the website at TeibelInc.com, thank you. You can also hit the subscribe button there and head straight over to iTunes. That's the greatest way to ensure you don't miss a single episode of Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next week.